Last week, Kath, we spoke a fair bit about the need to get things right,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and the struggle that, as humans and in the world, we want to get it right. And how many times have we had conversations with people and people are sharing their story? And I know I've shared on the podcast before, I hear some really big stories. I hear some
Yes.
big stories working in a prison. I hear some big stories in rehab. I hear some big stories in my coaching sessions. And yet I'm on the receiving end of these stories. And sometimes I want to get it right. I want to help fix the problem.
Yeah.
And what if it's not about getting it right?
And what if it's not about needing to fix the problem, you know?
And what if it's not about the need to fix the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know
What
I've done that before, you know, as a mum with my children and they bring things to the table and there's a problem and I love to help solve and fix their problems, but it's not about that, is it?
I was just going to say, what a great conversation to have because you're spot on with that. I think there is just as much as what we shared last week, there's something in our human nature to want to get things right.
Yeah.
For many of us, there's something on the inside of us that wants us to that wants to fix things. You
Mm,
know, we want to make things right for others as
yeah.
well. So when one of your children comes along and they're in a pickle or they sharing things that are hard, goodness me, as a mum, everything inside of you wants to jump in and make it right.
hmm hmm And I hear that, my youngest at the moment, I mean, he's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah.
He's performing at a wedding this week. He's got
Oh
another
wow.
wedding come up. He's on church all of the time, and he's got a school musical. And I'm just like wanting to protect and help and fix. And when he says he wants to go do something, I want to go, are you sure? And try and da da da. But I know he needs to navigate it. Will I provide wisdom and guidance and a space for him to come to me? Yeah, but if I was to step in and try and control the situation for him, he'd end up probably resenting me and, feeling squashed by his mum and um
Goodness, and that is so hard to not do. I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh, like, the hairs in the back of my neck are even standing up going, but yes, of course you want to jump in and control it all and,
yeah,
you
and
know, and
fix it.
and fix it. And oh, I mean, this weekend it was actually quite funny. We went to a dinner, a fundraiser dinner, and
Mm.
it was a black tie dinner. So we were all
Oh.
sort of dressed up, and my husband had been on call through the day, and he was sort of the backup. He was on backup call while we were
Mm.
at this dance. And part of dressing up, I took this little handbag, but a little one with
Okay.
me, and I couldn't quite fit my glasses, which I unfortunately do need now to to see across the
Okay.
room and to see people.
Yeah.
Um, I don't need them to read the menu. It's funny, he needs his to read the menu. I need mine to kind of see across the room and, notice
hmm
somebody. And so this little handbag could fit my glasses and my lipstick, but not my phone. So
Okay.
I said to my hubby, I'm not going to take my phone because it can't fit in
Mm.
this handbag.
hmm
Are you okay that we just have your phone? And he's, yes, no, sure. And so I knew he was on call, and anyway,
Mm.
nonetheless, we get there, and I think I asked him not only twice but like three times, "Hey, hun, you sure your phone is charged?" And while we were walking in, he said, I don't even know how to respond to that question. He said, of course my phone's charged. I'm on call. Like,
Yeah, okay.
yes, there was in me this need to control the situation because I didn't have my phone. And what if one of the
Mm.
kids needed us or something, or I wanted to
Mm.
take photos? Like I needed him to know that his phone needed charging. And not only did I ask once or twice, but three times. It's
Oh my goodness.
crazy, you know?
Yeah, that does sound crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's crazy. Mind you, I think when I look back, I kind of I did after his comment, I thought, gosh, that's interesting. Why am I so wound up? And I think actually we were walking into this function where I knew nobody really. It was all
Mm.
his work peers, and I think it was just my nerves, and I was trying to kind of,
Distract or
myself. So
yeah.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, well, we can't fix everything. We can't be in control of every situation. And if that's one thing I've discovered, I think back to the early days of coaching and I'd be so nervous about, what am I, when I'm listening to somebody's story and going to coach them, I was so nervous about having the right questions and help, but realizing it's not about that. It's about providing a space and providing an opportunity and connection. And life is about so many more things than fixing the problem. And
Oh,
there's always
absolutely.
how many different ways to fix a problem, as if our way is going to be the way anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I always remember one of our coach trainers always used to say to us, yes, it's one thing to want to fix the problem, but it's another thing to realize that the problem's often not the problem. What we think is the surface level problem,
It
there's
never
often a whole
is.
lot more happening underneath the surface. And so
Yeah.
I think, what do we want to actually share today? And I think it's this notion of, we want to encourage you if you're listening
Mm,
that you don't, first of all, back up, sort of backing up from last week, we don't need to always get it right. And
yeah.
secondly, we don't have to have the answers. And
Mm,
sometimes not having the answer, like if you've got a friend that is phoning you or it's one of your kids and they're sharing a big story or a big reality in their world, and you're listening and you're thinking, goodness me, I don't even know how to
yeah.
help
What to
this
do with that?
person or what to
Mm,
do.
mm,
We want to encourage you that, what if it's not about needing to have an answer? Or what about,
mm,
if it's not about needing to fix something? And to encourage you that there is such a gift in just being there with
yeah.
that other person
Yeah.
and really listening to their story and being there as somebody who's not judging them for their
Mm,
story, but just really leaning in and saying, I hear you. And
yeah.
gee, that must be hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing coaching taught me because, back in the day before all my coach training, I would have listened to that and said, what? But surely
Mm,
I've got to like try and fix it. Or, why are they
mm,
even telling me if they don't want me to help them
mm,
fix it? And I've learned over the years that there is such a, a gift that you give that other person when you don't try and jump in and fix it.
yeah. Yeah. As you're sharing, and that word, the gift, came to my mind because the times that I've experienced that gift of being held in a space, it's not the same as a hug, but it's like a hug. It's
Yes,
like this safe place where you've poured out what's going on and it's held safely.
yes,
You don't need to necessarily do anything with it, and would we like to? Probably. But often in the sharing and in that moment of being held in that safe place, that provides this freshness somehow and potentially helps us to see it slightly different, or it removes some of the cloudiness somehow.
yeah. It removes the cloudiness, and if you're being that safe space for somebody,
Mm,
and you're able to, um, with your body and your
mm,
expression and everything in you, if you're able to be that safe space
mm,
and to not judge what the person's saying and not need an outcome for them,
mm.
that also is huge because I mean, how often, Al, have you heard somebody, let's just say in a coaching session, they're about to share something, and before they even say what they want to say, they go, "Oh, this is going to sound silly, but da da da
Yep.
da da," or they share something and they go, "Oh, hearing myself say that, oh, just now I feel so stupid,"
Hmm.
and
All the
so
time. Mm.
yeah, and how often have you felt like
Hmm.
there's something on the inside of you that you've feel would be so useful to bring like out into the open, and yet you feel like really silly saying it, or
Hmm.
you just feel like, oh man, I'm going to really feel like there's no ways I can actually share this thought or this what's going on in my
Mm.
world because I just feel so embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's that vulnerable space again. So I
Mm.
think also there's so much, it's such a gift that you're giving somebody if you
Mm.
can hear someone's story without them feeling like you're judging them as being
Yeah.
silly or stupid or what did you do that for? Which
Yeah.
I put my hand up and unfortunately I've done that with my kids.
Yeah. I think we all have at different times, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it is a gift and it is a beautiful gift. And the people that I've had that experience with where I've received it from myself, it's an intimate, beautiful thing. And the connection you then have with that person can be really beautiful as well. It's certainly like a restorative in relationship. If you can, if it's a family member, it can really help to restore and to build uh, trust and in a relationship and with your friends. And from a coaching perspective, um, you can then, once things have been shared, you can then get curious. I mean, you said before, it's what people bring to the table. The problem isn't really the problem. And
Yes.
unless we get curious and provide the safe space for people to say, this is what's going on, and then unless we get curious in that space and dig a little bit deeper, we won't uncover what the other problem is. Like you
Yes.
already said when you went into that function the other day, you
Yeah.
already knew the problem wasn't, is the phone charge? You already said it was, you think it was because you were nervous. It wasn't your normal group of people. You wouldn't have known anybody. And it was this mask to sort of cover up this potentially feeling of being really nervous about being in an unfamiliar setting with unfamiliar people. And that there already, that's a whole coaching conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
No?
You
And
are
so,
spot on. Yeah.
and unless we voice what's really going on, we're not really having the opportunity to go there.
Absolutely. And this is I think what we miss so often when we do feel like we need the answer. So if
Mm,
we if you you know if you're listening to this and you've got a friend and you sort of feel like, oh my gosh, how am I even being a friend if I don't have an
mm,
answer and I can't fix this? Um, just to encourage you that when we feel
mm,
like we've got an answer, we often jump in too soon and too quickly with the answer anyway, that we don't give that space of curiosity to go and explore
yeah.
what's below the surface. So, our encouragement to be listening today is that it's actually a gift to
Mm,
not have an answer.
yeah.
Like it's you don't need to have the answer, and by
Mm,
not having an answer and by just sitting in that space with them and hearing
mm,
and what does Stephen Covey also say? He says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So if you're in
mm,
that space with them, um, not only listening, but also attempting to understand where they're at
mm,
and to empathize with that,
mm,
that is huge. And then, as you say, the curiosity of, in a non-judging way, asking,
mm,
I wonder what's going on here, and I
mm,
wonder what could help,
mm,
um, is so beautiful. And I do know from firsthand experience
yeah.
that being on the receiving end of a coaching conversation where the coach has managed to be that for me, just the
Mm,
space, um, that's when I've actually had big breakthroughs.
yeah.
If that coach had tried to fix it and tell me what they think needs to happen,
Mm,
that they may absolutely be bringing wisdom
mm,
and coming with great suggestions. But I've experienced that the biggest breakthrough is actually when we've sat in the curiosity
mm,
without judging it and just been able to have the conversation.
yeah.
That's when, yeah, like I think the God factor comes in.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we are in that space and we discover what we think is a possible way forward, if you can discover it for yourself, without someone telling you, that's completely different. If a mum tells a kid, I think you should do this, that, and the other, that is
Yeah,
very different. The way that your child goes and does that is going to be very different from if they had come to the realization themselves. Oh, how
hands
about I
down.
do this and then I try that and then that's a very different way of moving forward. Potentially, if they're doing the same thing, that's fine. But it's going to be a different heart. It's going to be a different motivator. Their mind is going to
Yes,
be different. And so I think
yeah,
if we can help each other, our friends and our family, and provide that safe space so that they are their own motivator, they're making
yeah,
their own decisions so that they follow through, hopefully.
yeah,
Like I've watched our second youngest, he finished year 12 last year and he hasn't really known what sort of apprenticeship he wants, but wanted some sort of apprenticeship. If I kept at him every moment of every day about the jobs he'd apply for, yada yada, all of that, he would have got sick of talking to me. I could have given him lots of wisdom. I've worked in the careers advisor space. I know exactly what he should do. But I want
yeah.
to have a great relationship with him and I wanted him to work it out. And the other day he accepted an apprenticeship and it's been a big few months as he's been applying for jobs and he's gotten lots of jobs that he's declined for, travel reasons or whatever
Yes,
reasons. Um, but it hasn't been an easy thing to watch because I could see maybe what he needed to do, but he's had to navigate it. And it's provided he was able to work it out himself to a degree because we provided the space for him to talk to us. Um, but he got to a point where I really need some money.
yes,
I
yes.
really need to be getting up and having routine and going to work every day. Righto, what am I going to do? And it was a real joy to watch him do that and work it out himself with obviously support. I didn't just leave him to his own defenses, of course.
But there's so much there. Oh gosh, I mean, the gift you've given him in
Mm,
that journey.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, if we're telling our kids what to do,
mm.
yes, there is the sense of, oh, here goes mum again, nag, nag, nag,
Yeah,
you know. And then there's also this whole thing, well, if it doesn't work out,
it's
I'm
mum's
just going to
fault.
blame mum. It's mum's
Yeah.
fault because he said. But also, as a parent, we're very keen for the outcome to come
Mm,
quickly. We want the
yes.
breakthrough and the outcome to happen like yesterday. But when we try and force things to happen, we actually rob them of the journey
Mm,
and the journey your son's had over, the season.
mm,
Goodness, what he's learned
yeah,
from himself
yeah,
and his own, sort of realization that, hey, I need money and I'm capable. I can actually go out and do something about this. And that the need for a routine in his day has come from his sense of, oh,
yes.
this is actually good for me.
Yeah,
Uh, as you say, it's completely different
yeah. Had I
to,
told him everything, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So, because when we tell them everything, what's the learning in that?
mm, mm,
So, potentially, you've actually saved him a whole lot of
mm,
other challenges down the line because he's learning
mm,
what he's learning now.
I hope
Then he
so.
doesn't need to go and learn those things,
Yeah.
in a couple of years' time. So well done, you. That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and well done to him. And it's funny because he'd come out at night, he'd finish his job at Coles at 9 o'clock at night or whatever, and he'd go, "Oh, so what's going on tonight?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm going to bed." Like, and he's like, "Oh, I've slept half my day away, and I've been to work, and I've got all this energy, and I want to do something." So he has worked it out. Everyone else is in bed. He likes being part of the family. Oh, right, I need to go to work during the day and then be at home and have dinner with everybody. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
been an interesting journey, but good on him for working it out. And I think the encouragement today is, yeah, sit in the space with people.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
have to know the answers, and in fact, it's better when we don't,
Yes.
because it's not about knowing the answers. It's about the journey with our people and providing people with that safety because our brain is wired for safety. And if we can be that safety for somebody, what an honor.
Absolutely. And you know what? It takes the pressure off as well. Back to our conversation from last week about perfection and
Mm,
needing to get things right. Um, when we take the pressure off ourselves of needing to fix things.
Yeah.
you know, and instead of focusing on having the answers and fixing things for others, when we can shift that to focusing on, okay, how do I be to be just a safe space and a
Yeah.
sounding board and a non-judging space
Mm.
to get curious alongside of people.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's uncertainty in that space because,
Hmm.
you know, again, you're kind of like, well, how do I be that? Again, you know, we want the steps, but it's just being what you recognize you needed when you were in that space, you
Yeah.
know, and being showing up and being curious. I think there's so much it's a loving, kind space to be in.
Yeah.
You know, when we're showing up wanting to fix it for others, we put pressure on ourselves, we put pressure on
On
them,
them.
we stir up this fear of failure again, and what if I don't get it right? And you know,
Mm.
and so I think as much as what in the early days of our coach training, I really struggled with that the shift between
Hmm.
rescuing and fixing things versus okay, so you mean I'm coaching is not fixing things? Like what?
Yeah.
And trusting that actually the outcome is so much better when you don't jump in to fix things. I mean,
Yeah.
that was such a mindset shift for
Yeah.
me to make and a revelation. But hands down now, you know, after having experienced both sides of giving and receiving in that space,
Yeah.
hands down, it's like I'm a convert for sure. It's definitely the better way to go.
It is. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things I've learned about this coaching journey is that realization. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I hope people who've listened today, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I hope you feel encouraged that you don't need to have an answer. You don't need to help fix people's problems. It's about providing a safe space and partnering with people on that level and just and loving people. It's about connection and
Mhm.
loving and being safe. And I thank you for the reminder, Kath. It was good because you brought it up last week in our conversation. So I'm glad we got to have the conversation today. And speaking of coaching, if you've tuned in and you go, okay, I'd really like to be on the receiving end of this gift of coaching, um, reach out. Kath and I are always keen to have those conversations and provide that judgment safe space, judgment free safe space. Um, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But on that
great.
note, okay, well, have a fabulous week and I can't wait to do it all again next week.
Yeah, see you next week, Al. Cheers.
Ciao.